Our next speaker is going to talk about how you can prep for your store visits. And he is the Chief Executive Officer at Twin City Co-op Partners. So please welcome Josh Resnik.
Thank you. Excellent. Well, excited to be here. Going to kind of take you through the whole piece of getting to retail, and obviously there are different, channels of retail. We heard a lot about the whole online thing, so I'm here to kind of talk more about the brick and mortar store side. Just kind of quickly before I get in, I'll give a little background on myself. Passionate foodie, as Jeff can attest to. When I got to LA, did a progressive dinner the first night where I hit ramen, poke place, and Korean tacos, I think. And I was sending him photos along the way, kind of teasing him. So I love food. I love food innovation and new products. And I've spent the last 20 years plus in the food industry. Kind of have had the Goldilocks. I've done really big. Was at General Mills for about 13 years and really liked working on new products. But have kind of been with a $15 billion company. Left there in 2010 for a couple years, ran really small startup, a grass-fed bison company. And, kind of came in, it was about $500,000 in sales. So helped grow that. Left after a couple of years. And now I'm kind of somewhere in the middle, I guess, from the Goldilocks perspective. So Twin Cities Co-op Partners is about a $70 million business, and we've got about 400 employees. And it's basically kind of a multifaceted food business in the Twin Cities. So we've got two pretty cutting-edge natural foods grocery stores. We've got a food distribution business, so we're a distributor in a 7-state area, and then we also do some food production. And then kind of outside of work, when I'm not doing this, I'm involved in Minnesota Cup, which is a food entrepreneurship contest and judging in that, and also on the board for a local Twin Cities farmers market. So what I'm here to talk to you about, I guess the top 10 lists are pretty popular, so we've got another one here. Stealing a page from David Letterman. This is from the home office in Minneapolis. And I would say, this is not, I don't really claim to be an expert. I really tap into the people I work with. So this is kind of co-written with my buyers, my category managers, a lot of local food entrepreneurs, and they kind of helped write it and kind of helped share these tips. But I think the idea, what I want to share with you is just some things of what I see that works and doesn't work, for new food brands and approaching retail. So number 10, consumer positioning. And the one on the left, kind of an old example here, so it's now 7 or 8 years old. But I think it still kind of holds true. I think on the left, I was in Yoplait in General Mills, and we kind of had a superfood, quote unquote, and we got depositioned. These super foods that were a lot higher in protein, simple ingredients, they were ahead of the trends. And I think the question, a lot of people have said this over the last couple of days, but the point I really want to hit home is, how are you different? How are you better? I worked with a consumer insights guy at General Mills, and he was, this big guy, shaved head. Every meeting, he's like, how are you different? How are you better? And that just kind of stuck with me in my head. And I think that's always important to just ask yourself. And I think you should have a really concise answer. It's not, don't give the 15-minute version of how you're different, how you're better. You should be able to answer in 30 seconds the one thing that makes you different and better. If you really want to disrupt a category, having a really good answer to that question is the single best way to do it. I think, the ones on the right here, I think did that very well also. So, and I would say kind of do it from the perspective of the consumer. So consumers are very much into ritual. They're eating the same product over and over again. How are you going to break into that ritual? How are you going to take what they're doing today and make them do something different? That is a big challenge. That's always the hurdle. And so what is that unmet need? What problem are you solving for them? So I really encourage you to think a lot about that. Next, this is kind of just another version of how are you different, how are you better, but this is kind of on the retail placement. So this is in the story now, not for the consumer, but for the buyer. Retail in kind of a bricks and mortar environment is kind of a one in, one out type environment. So in order to get on the shelf and to get that placement, you need to take something out. And so very literally, you do need to be better than something on the shelf. And so we will really look at that and kind of ask when a new product comes in, what is this going to replace? How is this different for the category? How is it going to grow my overall category? That's what we're really focused on, is growing categories. And so kind of finding those items that have a little bit different story, that take a different twist, are the ones we're going to take a chance on. And I throw Bobo's up there as a good example. In a bars category where you would say there's nothing possibly new that could happen in bars, they did something new, and it was a category that was so much about, the newest functional benefit, and we're out functional benefiting all the other bars. You're extreme sports, we're super extreme sports, we're super, super extreme sports. These guys took a different approach, and it was, this very like homemade, we actually, make it in a cooking pan, really different kind of like zagging, going in a different way of the rest of the category. And so that was something very unique, put it on shelf, and the turns have been fantastic. The other thing I would just say on the retail placement side is take feedback. Feedback really is a gift. And I know from kind of both sides of the aisle, having been selling in a lot of products when I was at General Mills, going into Walmart, getting beat up and coming back and feeling like crap. It is, I think when I changed that mindset and, early on when I was just like, oh, well, they don't, they're not understanding this and they're wrong about this and they're just missing this part of it. And when I kind of flipped that switch and said, you know what, there is something to really learn there. And after every single meeting, really documenting what is it that I learned, what can I read between the lines, and really taking all of that feedback. And again, you don't want to be kind of zigging, zagging all the time, but you want to take that feedback and constantly be getting better. So really ask for feedback, really kind of think about how you can always be getting better. Next one is category. And again, a few people have said this today. Think a lot about your category. I'll compare it, as we look out the window here in beautiful Santa Monica. I'll talk a little about surfing. And I'm really not an expert on surfing. I've never surfed before. I did see some surfers walking down to the water this morning, so that's about as much as I know about surfing. It looks pretty cool, but I think it's about finding that right wave, just like in surfing. And you want a category. That's about as much as I know about surfing. So don't. You want a category that's growing. You want a category that's got potential for growth, and you want a category that has an opportunity for white space. And I would argue most categories do have some potential for white space. So it's kind of finding what is your white space in that category. For us, there are a lot of categories. Show a picture of our drink. We added, an whole extra cooler of kombuchas, more fermented drinks, and it's amazing. Every single one we add has been extremely incremental. Dairy, not dairy-free milk, snack bars, meat snacks. There are a number of categories that have a lot of growth. I'd say, canned vegetables, you probably have a little bit more of an uphill climb. But I think there are a lot of categories. So picking the right category and then really knowing that category inside out. Know the different subsegments of that category. So maybe the category is growing 4%, but the subsegment you're entering is growing 30%. Really get to know that data and be able to kind of, manipulate that data in such a way that you can show that you are going to grow, go into a part of the category that's growing, and you're going to help drive further growth of the overall category. And this is one of the more successful entrepreneurs in Minneapolis who I talked to. One thing she really hit home is really visiting that section that you're going to be selling into, and really go, before you go in and do the store visit, spend some time in that store, in that aisle, looking at the category, know who the players are, know the range of price points, know how they're kind of, shelving the different stuff, and really get to know it inside out. Talk to some consumers. What's their perception of the category? Bringing some of that category knowledge really helps a lot as you're going into to meet with the retailer. Number 7, packaging. This is your number one marketing vehicle. Having a great Facebook page is nice. Having, cool Instagram, doing sampling. You're going to hit some of your consumers that way, but every single person who buys your product will see your package. So that might have come out sounding bad, but your packaging is the one thing that everybody, is going to interact with on your product, and it has to be right. So it has to be right both functionally, but also in terms of the design and the functionality. I think 20 is a great example, another Minneapolis brand. They could have gone, your cardboard tub and, put it out there, and that probably going to co-packers a lot more opportunities, but they were really able to stand out with a different form and really got a breakthrough through different things. And I'm not saying you have to have a different form to be successful, but I do think having form that does stand out and that's very functional and works is really important. And then on the messaging, I think this is the toughest part for a lot of entrepreneurs. Again, this kind of gets into the symbol of like, let me tell you about my brand. You have 15 minutes. I want to tell you the whole story about it. And, at the shelf, there's no better example of when you've got probably less than 15 seconds to tell the story to your customer. Having 17 different things on the front of the package, 0 of them get across. Having one thing on the front of the package, that one thing gets across. I mean, you can't see it that well, but this one on the right, this Crybaby Craig's hot sauce in Minneapolis, what's the one thing you want in a hot sauce? You want it to be hot, yeah, exactly. So it might be gluten-free, it might be GMO-free. You know, I don't know all the other attributes, but I sure shit. I mean, I want this thing to be like hot. I want it to pack a punch. And this thing, you know, it sends the message both in the brand name, in the imagery. They don't have to put a lot of other messaging on there. Let your website tell the rest of that story, but let your packaging should kind of be very loud and clear about what that single benefit is. So make sure your packaging stands up. Number 6, trial. You got to give someone a reason to buy your product. You know, they don't know your product. You know, you might have the greatest tasting product in the world, but again, you're trying to disrupt patterns. You're trying to get it in their mouth for the first time. That repeat is going to stand on how good the product is, but that trial, getting them to kind of ask, you know, getting them to get invited into their home for the first time, you need to do something to disrupt that pattern. And again, you know, this is something I heard over and over again from local entrepreneurs. They said, you know, you've got to have a strategy for trial. And, you know, whether it's demos, TPRs, off-shelf displays, getting in the community and doing events. I mean, I think sampling is really effective. You know, just all kinds of stuff. I mean, being secondary distribution. Angie's, which kind of became Boom Chicka Pop, another Minneapolis brand, they really got out there. Their turning point was, you know, really kind of secondary outside of the store. They were selling at Twins games, at baseball games, and they had vendors outside the stadium, and they were selling their popcorn. Got into mouths there, and then when people went into store, they saw the product. And, you know, so you got to be creative about it, but you got to invest in that trial. And that investment in the trial is investing in your future. So that's really important. You know, a couple examples here. This guy, their sauce is called K-Mama. It's a fantastic Korean hot sauce. And, you know, his story to me was, he said, I was in your store for 2 hours, and I would, you know, try it, and we sold out of all the product. They sold more product in the 2 hours he was sampling than in the previous 4 weeks combined. Now, obviously, you can't go to every single store, but it does make a difference. This salsa, they were in there the Friday before the Super Bowl, and you know, I was going to buy my normal $4.99 salsa, and I tasted this, and I'm like, okay, I'm going for the $8.99, the Bewitched salsa. You know, just fantastic stuff. So get your product in front of people. Keep doing it, do it over and over again, and really important investment. And this kind of ties a little bit to the scaling, which I'll talk about in a minute. But also make sure that you are scaling in a way that you can have successful trial. Number 5, good segue, scale responsibly. So all the pieces have to really move together. And this, again, you know, I've seen a lot of companies where it is tough to say no. You want to grow fast. You know, I talked to this one company where they're like, yeah, we're going to take it really slow. You know, we're just going to go to, you know, a couple of local co-ops first, and then, you know, just local Whole Foods. And we don't want to go national for 6 months. So we're going to wait to go to Target and Costco nationally for 6 months. I'm like, okay, you know, good luck with that. We'll see how it scales up. And they're still, you know, 2 years later kind of trying to figure it all out. And I've seen, you know, kind of even worse where a lot of companies will take that big plunge, can't supply it, and then they go back the other way. So when you think about scaling responsibly, you know, you're running an orchestra here. You need all the different pieces to come together. So it's your sourcing, it's your production, it's the sales, it's your team, it's having the right capital in place. You know, a lot better, both I think from a retailer perspective and from an investor perspective. You know, that company that grows, you know, 1 to 2 million, 2 to 3, 3 to 5, 5 to 10. You know, doing it in a pretty, you know, consistent way, as opposed to going from like 1 to 15 and then back down to 3. So scale responsibly. 4, channel strategy. You know, not a whole lot to say to this, but again, I think there is omni-channel opportunities, but I think where you are sold says a lot about you. And, you know, running kind of a natural foods channel business, you know, if someone is just sold at like Walmart and gas stations, we're probably a lot less interested in taking a chance on them. And so, you know, not to say, you know, you can have a very successful business in Walmart, gas stations, wherever else. And I really mean, you know, not to degrade that, but I think everywhere you're sold says something about your brand, and also it does say, you know, is part of the decision process you make. And, you know, even for us, I mean, we're in the same town as Target. We look a lot. What they do, they look a lot at what we do. Obviously, we're under the radar, but, you know, a lot of that trend sourcing, they come to our store. But we love beating them to market on stuff. We love being the first to, you know, new market with them. And I think we'll probably take more of a chance on a product if we can be first with it. So number 3, pricing. I thought the first presentation this morning, really some interesting insights about pricing. I would say, you want to really think a lot about where you are in relation to the rest of your category. And, you certainly don't need to be cheaper, but I think you want to be relatively in line, and you don't want to be, so much higher. And these are a couple examples. Killer product, this Jenny's ice cream. I think their product is called seriously the best chocolate ice cream you've ever had or something like that. And it is fantastic. It's at a $10 price point. And, I remember seeing it going into Target also, and they were at $10. And I remember about a month later seeing it like $7.99, $6.99, then on clearance at $5.99. So you really just have to be careful. These are a couple examples of products that are probably double, most of the other stuff in the market for us. And we just have seen really, really low velocity. So I think you can be at a premium price point, but you just have to be careful not to be out of line with everything else. On the flip side, you definitely don't want to go too low. It's a lot easier to lower prices down the road than to raise prices. And you want to also make sure that you are building in enough for gross margin. I think there are a lot of entrepreneurs that make the mistake of saying, we're on small scale, but we're going to make it up in volume, or we're going to get our cost structure significantly down. We're at this price now, but and our margins are like this, but our costs are going to go down 30% as we get scale. And I don't know if you want to bank on that either. So I think finding that sweet spot is really, really important. I would not underestimate just the importance of putting the right thought and time into pricing. Number 2, ingredient labels. This is kind of the example of what you don't want to do. I think inherently in the natural foods business, we're looking, we do count, and, we do want to see readily identifiable ingredients, and we want to see, short ingredient labels. I think, thinking both ways about absence of negatives and presence of positives. So what are some of those positive things? If you're in the meat space, grass-fed meat is great. Being able to say kind of on both of those things. Beyond the ingredient list, though, knowing kind of what those sources are and, being able to talk about it. So if you've got calcium sulfate, why is the calcium sulfate in there? Why is calcium sulfate a good thing? And, being able to know where you're sourcing it from. There was a successful popsicle company locally. They were doing very well. They were getting into all the other co-ops. And I kind of talked to our buyer. I'm like, why are we not taking this? And he's like, well, I looked into where their milk is coming from. I'm not happy about that sourcing. And, so we do really look very closely at, not just what's on the label, but, kind of scratch the surface behind it. So really know this inside out, know where you're getting that product from, and be able to answer it. And the last one, I'm going to kind of take the words of one of my mentors. This one, Fern Weiss, was our head buyer for a long time. She was at the Wedge for 25 years. She stood about 4'10" on tiptoes, and she was from New Jersey, very kind of, spoke very boldly, but kind of the kindest heart. She was able to kind of tell people, I never would take your product, and then kind of give them a hug and tell them how great they were. I'd walk through Expo West with her, and she was just like Mick Jagger at Expo West. She knew everybody. And actually, I did get a similar presentation to this one in Minneapolis a couple months ago, and I saw her in the store shopping. She's since retired the day before, and I'm like, so what advice would you give to food entrepreneurs? And she's like, be good. And I'm like, be good. Okay, that's good advice, and tell me a little bit more. And she's like, just have a really good product. It really does make a difference. And I know you've heard that a lot again and again the last couple of days, but at the end of the day, you can have great health attributes, great convenience attributes, a fantastic backstory. People will try you once, but getting in that routine, getting something that you're going to want to eat again and again. The 7 Sundays muesli product, I absolutely love. It's a Minneapolis product, 7 Stars yogurt. It's my morning 7 and 7. That's my routine every morning. And both those products taste great. That's why they're in that routine. The winner yesterday, the Tribali, tasted it and I was like, this is fantastic. This is like homemade, like something I would make. And again, I can't stress enough, be a tough critic on yourself. Your product has to be good. So that is kind of my top 10 list. Here's my email address. Connect with me on LinkedIn. I absolutely love new products, love this space, love to help. This is really what I enjoy most. So please feel free to ask me questions. Thank you.